Hello, everyone. Welcome to UC Davis. I'm Chancellor Gary May, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to our Aggie community. At UC Davis, choices abound. We have more than 100 undergraduate majors and more than 90 graduate programs. We're the most comprehensive school in the University of California system, with 4 colleges and 6 professional schools. No matter what you study, you'll find a world-class education and a diverse community. People who come to UC Davis want to make the world a better place. We're on the front lines of critical issues like managing climate change, bettering the health of humans and animals, and seeking a more sustainable future. When COVID struck, UC Davis helped lead the way to solutions. You may have seen the New York Times story that highlighted UC Davis as a role model in keeping not just our university safe, but the whole Davis community. Located in the heart of California, just west of Sacramento, Davis is California's college town. It's a place of big ideas and innovation in a friendly, small-town setting. Our icon isn't a bell tower or an Eiffel Tower, but a water tower. Think of Davis as the middle of everywhere. The outdoor adventures of Lake Tahoe, tourist spots in San Francisco, or just a short drive away. UC Davis attracts students and faculty from all over the world. Walk around campus or the city, and you might hear people speaking French, Farsi, Mandarin, and so many other languages. We're an active community where biking is the preferred mode of transportation. We're committed to sustainability and healthy living. Our farmers market is among the oldest in California, and it's the place to be on Saturday mornings. We're known for having one of the world's best agriculture and veterinary medicine programs. But we're so much more. Our region is thriving with technological development and entrepreneurship. Opportunity is everywhere. My goal is for each of our students to graduate with a job offer and with as few financial burdens as possible. In fact, 55% of our students graduate without student loan debt. Looking back, I remember how excited I was to plan for college, but I had a lot of questions too. UC Davis graduates consistently say their favorite aspect of life here was how welcomed and supported they felt. We take our academics seriously at UC Davis, but we're not afraid to be eccentric, make others smile, and help in times of need. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy learning more about UC Davis. Go Ags!
We should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Kachil Dihi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzal Dihi Wintun Nation, and Yochadehi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional homelands.
Good morning. My name's Chad Evans. Welcome to the National Commission on Competitiveness and Innovation Frontiers, our Phase 2 Launch Summit. Our conversations here today and tomorrow mark a really critical moment for the Council on Competitiveness and our National Commission. It was around this time 3 years ago when the National Commission launched at Arizona State University, but was suddenly, like everyone else and like every other organization, found itself at a moment of trying to find a new way to work with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to understand if we could, as a community, develop public policy in a turbulent, rapidly transforming environment. Others will share in the coming moments and the coming days just how we did that and how we went forward and what we accomplished as a community. But it's now my honor to introduce one of our national commissioners who, with a really strong team, has been supporting our work and helping us move forward as a community, and who today and tomorrow is hosting this launch summit as we begin a new process, a second phase of developing public policy recommendations and actions to amplify our National Commission goal to boost U.S. innovation capacity and capability tenfold. And so it's really my honor to introduce and welcome Dr. Gary May, the Chancellor of UC Davis. Chancellor May is one of our nation's most prominent voices in higher education. He's the 7th Chancellor here at Davis, which, as we saw in the video, is the most comprehensive and diverse campus on the UC system. 4 colleges, 6 professional schools, more than 40,000 students, more than $1 billion each year in annually funded sponsored research, and a university that contributes nearly $13 billion to the California economy. With a mission to lead the university to new heights of academic excellence inclusion, and public service, the Chancellor has really been part of leading a massive transformation here in Davis. In 2015, President Obama recognized his work, honoring the Chancellor with the Presidential Award for Excellence in STEM Mentoring, really for a career that's been punctuated by the development of nationally recognized efforts to mentor and develop talent across this country. And in 2018, he was elected to the National Academy of Engineering. That's fitting for one of the world's most preeminent engineers, who has driven advances in computer-aided manufacturing of integrated circuits. And in 2021, he received the Lifetime Mentor Award from the American Association for the Advancement of Science and an honorary doctorate from Georgia Institute of Technology, another great global institution that he took to new heights, having last served there as the Dean of the College of Engineering, which is the nation's, I believe, the largest and most diverse. So, Gary, I also should note that even just this week you've been honored the Lifetime Member of the Year by the National Society of Black Engineers. So, Chancellor May, we're really grateful at the Council to have you not only as a member, but as one of our national commissioners.
Thank you, Chad. There's always a danger that my introduction is going to be longer than my speech. Today's no exception. Good morning, everyone. Really good to see you here with us at UC Davis. On behalf of everyone at our university, we're delighted to welcome you to our campus for the National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers Summit. This is the ideal place to launch phase 2 of our efforts with the Commission. UC Davis is among the top 10 public universities in the country. We generate more than $12 billion in economic impact statewide, consistently ranked among the best in the world in agriculture and veterinary medicine, and first in the nation in both of those areas. And Davis, the city of Davis is, I kind of call it the middle of everywhere. There's this mega region developing between Silicon Valley and the Sierra foothills, and the cities of Davis and Sacramento are located almost right in the middle of that mega region. We're also in close proximity to the state capitol, the political center of the state, and policymakers that work there. UC Davis is central to the economic and innovative success of this thriving region. One key example is our Aggie Square development, which we are building on our campus in Sacramento. We're building a place where companies, researchers, students, faculty, and community advocates all work side by side, where cutting-edge UC Davis research powers innovative companies, and where UC Davis provides training for up-and-coming industries and for residents who live in the surrounding neighborhoods. Aggie Square will be the cornerstone of a regional identity and economic development. It's projected to inject $5 billion annually to the regional economy and support 25,000 ongoing jobs. You'll find this type of collaboration and innovative spirit across the entire University of California system. We're improving the world by applying our research and innovation to drive future prosperity and health. I'm very pleased that my good friend Chancellor Kim Wilcox from UC Riverside was able to join us today and will help provide a broader perspective on our state's innovation ecosystem. Before I wrap up, I'd like to thank the Council of Competitiveness President and CEO, the Honorable Deborah Wynn-Smith, and our commission leaders, Brian Moynihan, who's Chairman and CEO of Bank of America, Joan Gable, who's President of the University of Minnesota, and Janet Foudy, U.S. Chair of Deloitte, and Tom Mason, Director of Los Alamos National Laboratory. Also, a big thanks again to Chad Evans, our MC for the day, and to my fellow commissioners. It's really an honor to serve in this role and to continue this work with all of you. I'm looking forward to reconnecting and re-energizing around our goals at the Commission. Now I'd like to invite my esteemed colleagues to the stage for our first panel discussion about California's innovation ecosystem, Deborah Wynn-Smith and Chancellor Wilcox. And as they come up, I'll just mention that we also invited Chancellor Howard Gilman to join us today, but he was unable to make it, so he sends his regrets.
Thank you, Chancellor May. And I just first of all want to welcome everyone to UC Davis. I know many of you have traveled from around the country, and we've had a few colleagues who somehow got stranded on the East Coast with connections and things. But thank you all for making the effort to come and to spend the next 2 days with us. I thought I'd make a few remarks, Gary and Kim, before we start our discussion. But, this whole launch of the second phase of our National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers couldn't come at a more timely, important era in our nation's history and the history of the world. and all of you who will contribute to our deliberations over the next 2 days are really focused, I know, on how are we going to develop the policy, the recommendations, the actions, and engagement of our country to ensure that we have an ever-growing, inclusive prosperity, a better quality of life, and the security for all our citizens in the United States, but also in the world. So first, let me really thank you, Chancellor May, for hosting us here at UC Davis. Chad, thank you for your wonderful introduction of the Chancellor, and I'll make a few comments in a moment. But I also wanted to thank the wonderful team at UC Davis and Chief of Staff Carl Engelbach for his leadership in all the arrangements that are making this today possible. And of course, thank my colleagues at the Council, Chad Evans, Executive Vice President, and Bill Bates, our Senior Advisor, and Yasmin Hilbert, who came from Washington. So as Chad said, this is our first in-person gathering of the full commission community since January 22 launch at Arizona State University. But last summer in June, some of you joined us in Wyoming at the University of Wyoming, hosted by Ed Seidel, where we really began to formulate some of the ideas that have now been approved by our commission last July when they met in Washington at our National Competitiveness Forum. And now we really have to get under the hood, as it were, to develop the policy agenda. Our first report, and I hope everyone in this room has really read the report, Competing in the Next Economy, the New Age of Innovation. It is a tremendous, not just a compendium of powerful recommendations, but it gives really the status of where our country is in its national innovation capabilities, its challenges, its opportunities, but also through the lens, of course, of global competition and the incredibly transforming world. Of course, when the Commission report was issued in December 2020, we had a new presidential election, the beginning of the Biden administration, and very quickly the Council engaged with the new leaders in the administration and in Congress. We were very, very proud, of course, that many in the transition teams reached out to us, and many of our recommendations actually have moved forward and are reflected in the seminal legislation that has been passed this year. So we are really being heard across Washington, but also in our cities and with governors and our global allies and partners around the world. So I know we're going to talk about this a little later, but I want to just give the triumvirate of our framework of recommendations, and that's the 3X imperative. We have to have a 10X increase in the number of innovations, a 10X increase in the number of innovators in our nation, and a 10X increase in the speed of innovation. And we're going to have a great discussion on some of the plenary issues around that shortly. As you all know, one of our priorities at the Council on Competitiveness since our founding back in 1986, we've always had the pivotal importance of U.S. scientific and technological leadership at the heart of our agenda to drive U.S. productivity, standard of living, and global success. And so bold investments in U.S. research and development to secure our nation's leadership in basic research, but also ensuring its translation into the goods and services that will create value, wealth, jobs, is very much at the heart. And of course, we had a very important role in shaping the legislation that culminated in the CHIPS Plus Science Act that the president signed last year. Also, the Council has been very early on as an advocate and a leader on the importance of next generation semiconductors and the whole underpinning of the digitization of everything. And so, of course, during the pandemic, we saw the disruption in supply chains, the shortages of semiconductors, microelectronics. One of the first initiatives of the Biden administration was a very powerful executive order securing critical supply chains. And so, again, the bipartisan CHIPS Plus Science Act really is authorizing now these generational investments in R&D, critical technology development, and the new innovation hubs that are emerging across the nation, many of which now will be supported by the new director in the National Science Foundation. We were very pleased when that associate director joined us in Wyoming last June for our meeting to shape, what has become this agenda as well. One of the other recommendations of the Council's report and our work, very early reflected in one of the first speeches of Secretary of State Blinken, was the call for a new technology statecraft. And in essence, this means that in these areas of technology, we all know what they are, that are reshaping our world and that are all dual-use technology, we need a new technology statecraft creating the alliances and partnerships with our close allies, democratic nations, nations that share our values. This is more important than ever as we deal with the rise of fierce competitors and autocratic competitors. So again, how does the Council's work get implemented? Secretary Blinken launched a new State Department Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy and Critical and Emerging Technology. And we see, of course, the continued importance geopolitically, more so than ever after Putin's invasion of Ukraine, of our alliances. The Quad that brings together the U.S., Canada, Australia, India, Japan, and now the very important AUKUS alliance between the UK, the United States, and Australia. And we're very, very pleased that the chief scientist of the UK, Paul Monks, will be with us and giving a keynote remarks later today. So in this time of great turbulence, which always happens in human history, we do have a once-in-a-generation chance to leapfrog into this future state. And we're going to address today 4 pillars that really define this integrated strategy for next-generation innovation and competitiveness. They are the future of sustainability writ large, the future of work, the workforce, and the workplace, the future of deploying disruptive technologies at speed and scale, and the future of place-based innovation. And here on the campus of UC Davis, we are seeing place-based innovation in action. And so when you all come into your breakout groups today, we really ask you to think deeply and boldly about the agenda for carrying these 4 pillars forward. As I said, we couldn't have 2 better leaders to frame this discussion this morning than Chancellor Gary May and University of California, Riverside's Chancellor Kim Wilson. They're both inspiring leaders. Chad, you did a lovely job introducing the Chancellor, so I won't repeat some of his accolades, but I will say that we were very, very pleased, Gary, when we launched the Council's strategic partnership with the National Science Foundation back in 2016 called Exploring Innovation Frontiers, which led to a lot of the thought leadership shaping our commission. We had that launch meeting at Georgia Tech, and I know you were there and leading that as well. So I've had the pleasure to work with you for many years. And also, Chad, you didn't mention that Gary's currently the chair of APLU, the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. Kim, Chancellor Wilcox, I've known you for many years as well, from when you were at Michigan State, but leading the University of California, Riverside has really been also a journey of change and transformation. We had one of our major national meetings under the NSF partnership with you, the Southwest Regional Dialogue, and we learned so much about the new models and partnerships you've not only pioneered, but are deploying at scale at UC Riverside to bring in new generations of first generations of students into STEM from less represented populations, and the success strategy for that revolved around not just diversity and inclusion, but for the need for a holistic approach for socioeconomic, ethnic, and geographic differences. And that was a very, very exciting meeting we had. I often quote the comment of the upstairs and downstairs in research, and we can talk about that if you wish. But in any event, we're going to have a discussion now with these 2 great leaders on some of these challenges, and I'll sit down and we'll get started. But again, my chance up here now to say, please be engaged in the breakouts. Don't be shy. Say things that you think may seem both controversial and too bold, because that's what we're all about, to get your brilliant thinking and ideas and experience. Thank you. Thank you. So, Gary, I'll start with you on a very important issue because it has a lot of different interpretations. What is place-based innovation? What is a place-based innovation ecosystem? And what pivotal role do the universities play, and particularly a university such as UC Davis? And what's been the impact?
Thank you, Deborah, for the question. I think, and I'll take the question kind of in reverse order. I think the interplay between the university, the industrial economics, and government is so critical to innovation writ large. It's sort of a triple helix, it's been called in the past. And so when you talk about something being place-based, you're talking about a situation where you have all three of those entities in proximity physically, but also engaged in close interaction with the activities that we're undertaking. So, for example, for us, I mentioned Aggie Square in my opening remarks. That's a perfect example of the partnership between a university, public university with $1 billion of research, highly ranked, very interested in improving the local economy, the city of Sacramento in this case, and its governing bodies, and local industry, as well as industry that we're trying to attract. And we put all those three things together, you end up with a system which can add thousands and thousands of jobs and billions of dollars to the local economy and really jumpstart innovation in the region.
Just following up on that, what has been, in your view, the kind of anchor capabilities that has enabled UC Davis to emerge in this leadership role across, agriculture as well as health, veterinary? I mean, you have excellence in many, many areas, and you started more in the agricultural side.
Yeah, I think we're known certainly worldwide for our strength in agriculture and agricultural economics and agricultural policy. But I would say the combination of that, along with our strengths in human and animal health, environment, sustainability, and all the engineering and business and law and policy activities surrounding those areas of innovation really make us a unique place. And we're trying to capitalize on that uniqueness with our initiatives such as Aggie Square.
Thank you. Well, Kim, let me turn to you. First, of course, asking you that same question about place-based innovation in your world, anchored in Riverside. But also, if you feel like it, comment a little bit on the Michigan world, because that's also been a place in the past of tremendous place-based innovation, and now is under great transformation as well.
Thanks, Deborah. Great question. Historically in America, of course, we were place-based. Kansas City stockyards, because that's where you could drive the cattle to and slaughter them. Same with Chicago. Hollywood is there because of some great people who created a film industry. Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Midwest, steel. The iron ore is there, and so there was steel there. It turns out today we don't make many cars in Detroit, but 80% of the automotive engineering in the world is still in Detroit. So yes, it's place-based. It's taking advantage of what is in the geography, but there's also a talent piece. And that's really what I think our future has to be about. It's the talent pool, the critical mass of people that are ready to innovate, because you can innovate like Hollywood. There weren't cameras there that started an industry. There were people there who started the industry. And so when I look ahead to the rest of the 21st century, it's how do we create that innovative cluster of people around the country?
So, looking at UC Riverside, and I would like you to share the comment about the kind of upstairs, downstairs culture in research that we need to break through in the United States. And I think our colleague we all watched Upstairs, Downstairs years ago, at least I did, at a different time of life.
There's some faces here I don't think did.
I'm seeing Paul Monk's looking there. But it was a brilliant comment, and do you want to share a little bit about that?
If we're going to be effective in the 21st century and compete with China and do all the things we need to do, we can't leave part of our country behind. And right now, wide swaths of America are being left behind. And there's probably two key parts to that. One that Deborah has pointed out repeatedly, we don't have broadband access in most of America. You can't be part of the world community, the innovation community, without access to broadband. And the other piece, the institutional piece, there in the, in the latest NSF rankings of research expenditures, there are 800, 900 schools or something like that have received research funding in the last 5 years. Of those, 20 are at $1 billion or more. 55 are at $500 million or more. Over 800 are $50 million or less. Now, I'm all about a meritocracy, but just like any meritocracy, you have to have some kind of equity and access to the resources. And the $1 billion club is only going to get bigger and bigger. And just like so much of the rest of America, the gap between those that have and those that have not is only going to grow. You can imagine a school with $10 million of research funding doesn't have the infrastructure of one with $1 billion of research funding. So which is going to be more competitive next year? The $1 billion club, not the $10 million club. And all those 800 schools with less than $50 million are full of bright students, full of brilliant students who simply aren't going to have the same chance to be part of this innovation ecosystem and grow into it in the same way as their colleagues at the $1 billion school. Now, again, I'm not trying to undermine our merit system for awarding grants in America, but we have to find some way to address this inequity, because it isn't just an institutional inequity, it's a geographic inequity, and by extension, it's a student inequity because of which students get to go to which schools.
Thank you. And just to build on that, before we turn to the area of the university industry government partnerships and how that has evolved and the pivotal importance of it, I remember your colleague talking about how did we get so many young people, particularly of Hispanic background, doing 4 years of STEM? Why were they staying in? We have that whole issue of, okay, you start in a STEM degree, and by the time you're a sophomore, you've somehow been weeded out and you don't go on. Then we don't have the feeding into the graduate schools. We know, I don't know what's the exact number now. It's over 60% of our graduate students are non-Americans. Very, very serious issue. But she said, if you look at the research capability, the equipment of the undergraduates, it's like the downstairs. There's not much. And then you go into our graduate labs and, there's everything in the world, the equivalent of, the best stove you could ever have, et cetera, et cetera. She said, what we did is that we took freshmen and sophomores in STEM and put them in those advanced research laboratories upstairs, and it changed their whole trajectory. Is that model scaled or?
Scaling. I'm looking at all my institutional colleagues. We do all we can to achieve that, but there's only so many labs. There's only so many mentors. There's only so many MRIs. There's only so much equipment. And that's on a pretty well-resourced campus. And when we think about all the campuses that don't have the resources, those opportunities are scant.
Sure.
I was going to say, I think undergraduate research is so critical, and I've long been involved in programs to promote undergraduate research. We do that here, certainly at UC Davis, but to get the students that don't have access to the infrastructure that Kim mentioned, give them that access. It's really important to form these partnerships between the haves and have-nots, if you will, so that those students who may not have access to some of the labs and the state-of-the-art equipment can spend a summer or spend a quarter or spend a year at a university partner that allows them to have that access and to further their careers.
And, building on that, in the White House, the leaders of the Historically Black College and University Initiative have reached out to the council to team, because we do have a number of university presidents, David Wilson and others, that would fall into that historic group of universities. And they have often said to me, we want the partnerships. It's not just building up, having a supercomputer would be great, but we want to be in the research where supercomputing is done. So, Gary, let's talk about, you from the very beginning of this great institution, you've worked with industry, you've worked with the private sector. you've worked with the government. I mean, partnerships are sort of your middle name, and they've evolved. So share a little bit about that. We always say we don't do enough in the United States, but everybody around the world is envious of how we have those partnerships.
You know, I think, Deborah, particularly for public universities, which Kim and I represent, it's really incumbent upon us as part of our mission to give our students some sort of return on the investment that their parents and they are making in the university and that the state is. So we really have to work with industry to enable the students to have a pathway, a career pathway from their studies directly into a job and a career and leadership in their field. Some of my colleagues at other places don't think that's part of their responsibility, that we owe students an education only, but I disagree strongly. I think we owe them access to a career. Now, that doesn't mean we're vocational. We certainly want to be at the highest levels of discovery and advancement research, but at the same time, we have to be in the business of transforming lives, which for places like us, where 40% of our students are first generation and from traditionally disadvantaged backgrounds, that's really critical to not only the university and to those students and their parents' lives, but also to the state and the state's economy.
So I know we have the opportunity tomorrow, some of us, to visit the Robert Mondavi Center, and you're so famous, again, in the world for your work in viticulture. How did that partnership started a long time ago?
It started long before I got here, but I'll take credit for it now since I'm here. Not only do we have the Mondavi Institute, we also have the Innovation Institute for Food Science, that led by Professor Justin Siegel, sitting just to my left here. You're going to hear from him tonight. We are pioneers in food as medicine, next generation food systems, food policy. We just were able to participate in a NSF Engine's proposal around these topics. Hopefully, we'll get the grant. And we just see that as part of our ongoing mission to take our traditional strengths in agriculture and expand those to what we think is the next really important innovation area, which is, we think, food and food systems.
Well, and of course, food security is a huge issue now throughout the world, and often people say, well, what's the United States' largest export? People forget it's agriculture. The United States and Brazil could feed the world. So it's a very, very important innovation for the future. Kim, let me turn to you, and then we're going to talk about how we commercialize all these innovations. But let's talk about the partnerships first.
Yeah, if I could, for the non-Californians in the room, Deborah's comment of we're the pride of the world, but it's not enough. The same is true for California when it comes to community college connections. In the University of California system, we're expected to graduate an equal number of native freshmen and transfer students. That's just part of our ethos. And back to your access for research experiences for undergraduates, that's a huge opportunity for community college students to move to a university. All 10 are research universities, be part of that. But also, even if you're not the student in the lab, you may be a friend of a student in the lab. You may be the brother of a student in the lab. Those kinds of connections also develop this bigger web of interconnectivity. And as Gary points out, it's government, it's the private sector, and this reaching down into community colleges and K-12 as well that creates that ethos, that ecosystem that means so much, I think, to the future of innovation in America.
And what would you highlight as one of your early or more recent, fairly large-scale partnerships with industry?
We just recruited the California Air Resources Board headquarters to Riverside. And for those who don't know, that's the group that caught Volkswagen cheating on their pollution. And they just built a $500 million facility on our campus. And around that now we're clustering all kinds of industries, those related to the automotive industry, of course, because they want to be here for the people who set the standards for vehicles of the future, but also a host of other transportation pieces. So it's back to this notion of critical mass. It's an effort to take a center with the research at UCR and Air Resources Board. We're the air quality research capital of the world now. How to build that into a broader industrial center for America.
Chad is giving me the signal. We're almost out of time, so we'll kind of just surface this and save it for later, and I know we're going to hear about it throughout the day, and that's the whole issue of our commercialization from startup to scale up. You know, obviously we're all aware of what happened with Silicon Valley Bank and its role in the startup community, and we're not going to be the ones to discuss all that today. But, you know, this challenge of venture capital, private equity, how we finance, particularly these big innovations at scale, is huge. I mean, I often say if Intel were looking for venture capital today for Beyond Moore's Law, nobody in the venture capital community would invest in Intel. We've called for a national infrastructure bank. So that's an important, you know, area we need to work on in the working groups. And finally, I want to just ask both of you to say something. I don't want to put you on the spot, but as university presidents, I mean, you have to work with and both of you have to work with your states, you have to work with the federal government. Is there anything you would love to see reformed that would make this whole process of collaboration with the powers that be in government easier and smoother?
I can think of many, and by the way, I live on the spot, so I'm used to that.
And you're going to put me on the spot in a few minutes too in your interview. So,
yeah. The first two things that came to mind were immigration was one, and there's lots that could be done to improve the immigration system in the United States, and we all know that. And the second one I would say is intellectual property policy and how we generate and translate intellectual property from the universities and research labs into the commercial sector, private sector.
Thank you.
Great answers. I'm going to stick with the equity piece. I'm heartened. Department of Defense is now doing Take the Pentagon to the People events around the country with an eye toward trying to diversify the civilian and the military workforce. Department of Education, of course, has always been interested in STEM, in access, in innovation. There are several, Ponch at the NSF, that's a theme of him. I think there's now awareness across several different spaces in DC about the need to think differently about our future. And it starts with the notion of people and equity, but in my mind, you quickly get to geography and institutional equity as well. So I'm not thinking to change so much as expedite some of the thinking that's already underway in many centers in DC.
So that initiative's called Take the Pentagon to the People? That's very creative.
They came to Riverside, I guess, for people.
Well, I'll just close by saying, and I always give him credit because this was his creative thought. At our first meeting of the National Innovation Commission in 2019, our then Vice Chairman of the Council, Michael Crow, I think you all remember this, from ASU, said, you know, if the United States, just think of us, if we were a baseball team, we don't even have 10% of our people playing on the team. So that's really our ultimate challenge. Thank you both. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being commissioners. And Gary, thank you for having us here.